April 16, 2025, a coup attempt came alarmingly close to toppling the government of Burkina Faso. 6 individuals, some in uniform, others operating covertly, conspired to seize the presidency, dismantle the state, and transfer power into foreign hands. But who were these men? How did they breach the very institutions meant to protect the country? And why did they seek to destroy a revolution built on the promise of freedom? Let's take a closer look. There were no dramatic assaults on the presidential palace, no chanting crowds or waving banners. Instead, there were hushed conversations, secret plans, polite smiles during briefings, and respectful salutes during roll calls. These were not outsiders or rebels in hiding. They were insiders, individuals deeply familiar with the mechanisms of the state because they operated within them. That's what made this betrayal so severe. It wasn't a sudden strike, it was a silent wound, methodically inflicted from within. When Captain Ibrahim Traoré announced their names, it wasn't merely a press release, it was a stark warning to the nation. Not all threats are external. Some sit right beside you. Each of the accused had a distinct background, a different face, a unique position. But they shared one chilling trait: a readiness to destroy the system in order to claim power. Their professional records were strong. They held positions of trust, enjoyed broad access, and carried distinguished credentials. Yet beneath the badges and service histories was a darker conviction that Traoré's vision for Burkina Faso had to be overthrown, not through discussion or democratic means, but by force. What makes this plot even more unsettling is the scope of its reach. It wasn't the work of a single rogue faction. It was a network carefully laid out across military ranks, regional boundaries, and even ideological lines. One conspirator was still embedded within a national security hub. Another had gone missing while stationed overseas, only to surface in a foreign capital. Some had left military service quietly years before, but their loyalties never faded. They remained rooted in conflict, with one foot in the armed forces and the other in the shadows. Planners, recruiters, manipulators, and some with ties that reached far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. But what drove them to act? What pushed trained soldiers meant to defend to instead turn on their own? Many believe that Traoré's ascent disrupted a long-standing balance. Under his leadership, quiet agreements with foreign powers came to a halt. The era of outside guidance had ended. He spoke not of mere survival, but of sovereignty of production over dependence. To some, his message was one of freedom. But for others, especially those who had thrived under the old system, it was unsettling. Traoré was choking off the privileges of the elite, and in doing so, he created adversaries both abroad and within his own ranks. Some of these men were once celebrated, others forgotten. Yet, in their shared resentment, they formed a bond. Not a movement for the people, but a coalition focused on reclaiming power. They operated in silence. They chose their recruits carefully. And they waited because they understood that proximity to power made it easier to dismantle. That's what made their mission so dangerous. This wasn't a disorderly uprising, it was a carefully planned operation, a betrayal from within, hidden in plain view. So how do you coordinate such a precise plan without detection? The answer doesn't lie solely with the individuals, but in the networks they tapped into and the allies they quietly enlisted. These 6 weren't just soldiers. They were architects of something far more sinister, something that infiltrated the country's most sacred spaces. Not through violence, but through ideology, and that's where our story takes us next. But before we move on, a quick thank you to the Black Culture Diary community, a space where Black voices, histories, and legacies are not only honored but elevated. By joining, you're doing more than supporting this channel. You're becoming part of a transformative cultural journey. Now, let's continue into the rural heartlands, where traditional systems still hold sway over modern institutions. Here, local chiefs... I'm AMS pastors and spirit mediums still carry more weight in people's lives than government ministers. These are the voices people turn to when told not to trust the state. These are the hands that can turn calm into chaos or peace into fear. The conspirators understood this well. That's why, even as the coup was being planned, Quiet messages were already being sent to key religious and traditional leaders across the country. Not threats, not commands. Just soft promises, appeals wrapped in moral language. They weren't asked to take up arms. They were asked to plant doubt, to question the government's right to rule, to speak of discontent, to prepare people's minds for rebellion. All through sermons, sacred stories, and ancestral memory. It was a form of psychological warfare, carried out with surgical precision. Some leaders resisted, others listened. A few, according to secret intelligence reports, agreed to act as silent go-betweens, connecting the coup plotters with local communities. In areas already worn down by poverty, insecurity, or neglect, these messages didn't fall on deaf ears. Most people didn't want to betray their country. But many were ready to believe that their country had betrayed them first. That was the disturbing brilliance of this phase of the plan. The goal wasn't to seize Burkina Faso with violence, it was to get the people to welcome them in. And the method wasn't ideology. It was faith. It's crucial to understand how delicate the line is between spiritual guidance and political power in parts of Burkina Faso. An imam's opinion can still sway a village's vote. A chief's silence can be read as approval for rebellion. A traditional song can turn whispers into facts. The coup planners wanted to use all of this to their advantage. This strategy also served another purpose: disguise. Troop movements can be tracked, arms shipments can be traced. But sermons, shrine visits, advice given at funerals or baby naming ceremonies, those are much harder to monitor. This gave the plan a layer of cultural credibility, even as it edged closer to treason, and here lies the chilling part. If this stage of the plot had worked, it wouldn't have looked like a coup. It would have seemed like a grassroots movement endorsed by tradition and fueled by moral outrage. Traoré wouldn't have fallen to generals. He would have been rejected by the very culture he claimed to lead. That's the real threat facing Burkina Faso today. Not just armed rebellion, but beliefs turned into weapons. As many African countries reconnect with their traditions, the boundary between cultural pride and spiritual manipulation is razor thin, and the plotters knew exactly how to cross it. Now the question is, who helped them? Were there spiritual leaders who knowingly joined the cause? Were religious networks involved? Were they exploited without knowing it? Or were some misled convinced they were protecting the nation, while in truth they were contributing to its downfall? The investigations are still underway, but one fact is already clear: the battlefield has grown. It's no longer confined to military compounds or the halls of government. It now extends into sermons, ceremonies, and the collective memory of the public. And if these conspirators were willing to distort religion to serve their aims, what or who else might they have aligned with? The answer, as uncovered by intelligence officials, is even more alarming. As they dug deeper, a disturbing link surfaced, one that connected domestic traitors to actors well beyond national borders. Not just foreign nations, but the very extremist factions Captain Ibrahim Traoré had vowed to eliminate. This revelation marks a grim turning point. Burkina Faso's intelligence units discovered that some of the coup plotters weren't operating in isolation. They had ties to insurgent groups, alliances that redefined the nature of the conspiracy. What was unfolding wasn't just a military rebellion or a political insurrection. It was a collusion between uniformed defectors and unmarked militants, a convergence of ambition and disorder. This is the unsettling face of modern warfare in the Sahel. The line between state institutions and insurgent networks is increasingly blurred. Where money, arms, and power are involved, even the most polished uniforms may mask hidden agendas. Security sources disclosed a troubling pattern: intercepted communications, encrypted voice notes, questionable money transfers, and irregular movement data all pointed in one direction. Several of the 6 accused were in direct or indirect contact with individuals linked to insurgent factions operating in the north and east, areas long plagued by militia violence. While the content of these communications wasn't always explicit, the pattern was unmistakable: military insiders and extremists circling each other, each seeking advantage. One side had intelligence, the other firepower. One needed access, the other sought an opening. And at the center stood a state, unaware, encircled. What may have united both camps was a common adversary, Traoré. The plotters viewed him as the leader who stripped them of their influence. The militants saw him as an unyielding opponent, one who refused negotiations, intensified counterinsurgency efforts, dismantled foreign-backed operations, and replaced them with a local approach. For both sides, Traoré disrupted their status quo. So they sought to reset it. These weren't formal pacts sealed in secret bunkers. They were pragmatic arrangements, quiet agreements based on convenience. A commander turning a blind eye at a checkpoint, a lieutenant tweaking patrol routes, a captain ensuring a key convoy doesn't arrive. This is how insurgent groups survive. Not just through violence, but through discreet favors and silent cooperation masked as routine protocol. But perhaps the most chilling question remains. What if the coup had actually succeeded? What would have followed? Would the insurgents have honored any new government? Or would they have seen it as an opportunity, a weakened system ripe for exploitation? With fractured command and eroded trust, the consequences could have been catastrophic civil unrest, territorial disintegration, even an extremist push toward Ouagadougou itself. And it's important to remember, these groups aren't content. With partial control, they aim for absolute rule. They reject constitutions, ignore borders, and oppose shared governance. Their objective is total collapse of state institutions, replaced by a regime ruled through fear, ideology, and force. To them, the coup wasn't a danger, it was an opening. That's why this plot wasn't merely an act of betrayal. It was a calculated effort to destabilize the nation from within, with consequences that could have been far more severe than anyone anticipated. A chain reaction has been set in motion across the Sahel. Both Mali and Niger would have found themselves with a weakened partner. The AES alliance would have lost a key player, and most critically, Burkina Faso's move toward regional independence could have been crushed before inspiring others to follow suit. Though 5 of the conspirators have been exposed, captured, or identified, the networks they built and the contacts they nurtured still remain, some hiding in remote areas, others operating openly. This leads to a more pressing question. Where did this plot originate, and even more crucially, who gave it cover? Authorities now believe the trail leads across the border into a country quietly drawing attention. That's because 2 of the accused weren't merely plotting behind closed doors, they were doing so from another nation. And that brings us straight into the heart of the next unfolding crisis. Before we continue, please like and share this video and subscribe to our channel for more content on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's move on. Every coup has its base of operations. Every rebellion its safe haven. In the case of this failed attempt in Burkina Faso, the staging ground wasn't a remote jungle hideout or a hidden underground passage. It was reportedly a foreign capital, Abidjan, the modern, bustling cityscape of Kate d'Ivoire Dodd's intelligence. Reports began mapping out the structure of the coup. One troubling fact emerged: at least 2 of the 6 alleged plotters, Lieutenant Abdrahmani Barry and Officer Kaber Constantine, were not even inside Burkina Faso during the planning phase. They were in Abidjan, not in hiding, but living in the open, seemingly with access to support networks and communication tools. Beyond the reach of Burkinabé law enforcement, this wasn't a scenario of political exiles organizing from afar. These were trained military personnel, one even a senior justice official actively developing plans to overthrow a legitimate government. And they were doing so openly. That discovery has now sparked one of West Africa's most delicate diplomatic challenges. The issue isn't just why these men were in Côte d'Ivoire, but what they were able to achieve there, and more importantly, what was allowed to take place around them. Did they receive help? Were local authorities informed? Could there have been complicity, or at the very least negligence within Ivorian institutions? So far, the government of Côte d'Ivoire has remained silent. There have been no official statements, no joint announcements, and no public steps toward extradition. But that silence is becoming increasingly noticeable. Inside Burkina Faso's leadership circles, the mood is shifting. Quiet frustration is giving way to strategic suspicion. In closed-door discussions, senior Burkina officials have reportedly asked how two fugitives could orchestrate such activities unnoticed in the territory of a neighboring ally. After all, Burkina Faso and Côte d'Ivoire have historically shared diplomatic relations, economic ties, and mutual interests in counterterrorism. But now, doubts are clouding that relationship. Because this isn't simply about fugitives hiding abroad. This story isn't just about shelter, it's about foreign soil potentially being used to destabilize a nation already under pressure. And that raises even more troubling questions. Were these plotters acting alone in Abidjan? Or did they have allies, political, military, or private, offering them cover? Was the city simply neutral ground, or was it being used as a launchpad? What's even more concerning is this. If just two coup plotters could operate from Ivorian territory, who else might be doing the same undetected, unchallenged, and unchecked? Burkina Faso's military intelligence is now said to be following several communication trails that point not just to individuals, but to entire influence networks spread across West African capitals from Abidjan to Accra, from Dakar to Lome. Some of these networks are driven by ideology, others by profit. But they all share one goal: to stop Traoré's Pan-African movement before it becomes unstoppable. The Côte d'Ivoire connection is particularly provocative, because it could shift the region's geopolitical dynamics. If it's proven that a neighboring country knowingly gave safe haven to the coup plotters, it would further heighten AES's distrust of external actors and might even force a rethink of regional security alliances, and this situation is unfolding in a tense environment. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are already steering a new path through their alliance of Sahel states, cutting ties with France, rejecting Western military involvement, and advocating for African-led defense and development. This new direction has made them the focus of diplomatic pressure, economic sanctions, and possibly covert attempts to destabilize them. So, when two coup plotters are found organizing from a city like Abidjan, it becomes more than just an intelligence concern. It becomes a spark near a dry forest of diplomatic strain. So far, Captain Traoré has chosen not to escalate the matter publicly, but sources indicate that Burkina Faso has already opened discreet diplomatic channels, possibly pushing for clarification or even extradition. The spotlight is now on Côte d'Ivoire to show that it is not becoming a hub for counter-revolutionary activity. Because even if the Ivorian government wasn't directly involved, the mere fact that its territory provided cover for such planning is a serious breach of trust. And in a volatile region like this, lost trust can quickly turn into confrontation. At this point, the stakes go far beyond punishing a couple of plotters. They now involve a regional diplomatic test, one that could reshape alliances and redefine who is seen as a friend or foe. And amid all this, one man remains missing, Captain Wedderon David, the only plotter still at large. While diplomats debate and states issue denials, he remains out there, his whereabouts unknown. As the dust begins to settle and the betrayal fades into history, Captain Ibrahim Traoré isn't celebrating a victory. He isn't claiming the threat is gone. Instead, he's doing something more calculated, turning this near-death moment into an opportunity for national reflection. For many leaders, a failed coup would prompt swift revenge. Traoré seems to be playing a longer game: purges, mass arrest, televised trials, and sweeping military reassignments. These are familiar scenes after a coup. But Traoré, shaped more by frontline combat than by political maneuvering, has taken a more refined path. Not slower, sharper. Because he recognizes something many outside observers overlook. This coup wasn't just a scheme. It was a symptom. A symptom of a long-standing affliction still coursing through Burkina Faso's institutions. And to cure it, he's not only chasing down traitors, he's reforming the system that allowed them to emerge. His first move was to tighten the military's command structure. In recent weeks, his administration has quietly restructured several critical military units, especially those involved in intelligence, internal security, and counterinsurgency. But unlike previous regimes that rotated generals like cards in a deck, Traoré is digging deeper, assessing loyalty, ideology, and even regional affiliations. He no longer wants a military that simply obeys orders. He wants a force that believes in the mission of rebuilding the nation. That means removing not only the conspirators but also those who enabled their rise. At the same time, Traoré has initiated a major overhaul of Burkina Faso's internal security strategy. This includes reforming the state's engagement with religious institutions and traditional leadership structures. The failed coup revealed how religious influence could be manipulated, and Traoré isn't attacking religion, he's reinforcing it. Trusted spiritual leaders are now being included in state consultations not as figureheads, but as genuine partners in maintaining national unity. The message is clear: no more religious loopholes for political disruption, but Traoré's response isn't limited to institutions, it's symbolic as well. In the weeks following the coup attempt, he made several unannounced visits to remote military outposts and high-risk communities. No cameras, no scripted addresses, just a soldier walking through areas where bullets often outnumber books. According to those close to him, Traoré believes the real fight isn't in government halls or policy documents. It's in the forgotten corners of the country, where a whisper from a rebel or a rumor from a deserter can carry more weight than a law from the capital. He's addressing that silence with presence and with action. Roads are being built, irrigation systems are being developed, vocational training centers are emerging. Because Traoré understands what many of his critics failed to grasp: you can't kill a revolution with bullets, and you can't protect it with fear. You protect it with progress. But perhaps the boldest part of Traoré's counteroffensive isn't within Burkina Faso, it's across the region. Instead of turning inward, he's using the failed coup as a catalyst to deepen strategic alliances with Mali and Niger. The integration of the alliance of Sahel states is accelerating. What started as a military alliance is now expanding joint trade routes. Shared infrastructure and early talks of a new regional financial system are all underway. Traoré's message is unmistakable: you tried to divide us, so we will unite even more. The rules have changed. The masks are off. Now, the mission is clear: not just to defend Burkina Faso, but to rebuild it into a nation where betrayal has no place. And soon all those involved, or even considering involvement in plots, will face justice. Do you believe that attempts to weaken Burkina Faso are actually making it stronger? Let us know in the comments. Can Traoré really be stopped? If you enjoyed this video and want to see more like it, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss future content. We're committed to telling stories that often go untold, diving into Black culture, history, and the untold legacies of Black civilization. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay tuned.